Hello fishing friends, this is Matthew with Outfishing 13 bringing you another reel repair and service video. Today I have what is called the Rhino Spin Cast 3 or the RSC3. Now this is a reel made by Zebco, but they branded it under what's called a Rhino. So let's get started and get this one fixed up and ready to go back out fishing. Okay, if you watched any of my other service videos, you know you just need a few simple tools to work on the Zebco reels. You'll need a screwdriver, maybe a big one and a small one, maybe a Phillips screwdriver. You'll need a pair of needle nose pliers. You'll need some reel grease for greasing the gears, and then for the bearings and other parts you'll need some reel oil. I'm using some Lucas oil here and some Penn reel grease here. I really like this so far this year, and so I'm keeping using it. Okay, now for the Rhino Spin Cast, I've had these apart before, and there's one other little tool that you may need. You may be able to get away with using a small straight screwdriver. I'll show you when we get into that. Alright, like any Zebco reel, the first thing you need to do is take the front cone off. You push down on it and cock it. That will get the pins out of the way. Next we need to take the spinner cone assembly off. To do that, hold the handle and spin it to the left, counterclockwise. I always like to take and look underneath here, inspect this, make sure it's got all the springs in it and that everything works. It should retract in just like that. Okay, the next thing we need to do on this one is take off the spool. So we're going to use a small screwdriver and take this E-clip out, just like that. That came off easy. Then we're going to take off this. This is a keyed drag washer. And then here we have a fiber drag washer. Now we can take this off, and generally this is all stuck to the back, so we have another fiber drag washer and a keyed drag washer. Now I bought this reel used, and so one of the things I noticed is that this grease is starting to get a little bit tacky and old. It probably wasn't yellow. It was probably clear, and so it is getting old. Okay. The next thing we need to take out is the drag adjustment gear. And this one has two parts to it. It has, looks like it has a stainless steel washer and doesn't have any keys on it, and then this part with the gears on it. And you'll notice that this, let me just demonstrate here, but when you tighten the drag on these, what happens is these will turn around and it pushes up on some ramps. So you need to have that installed correctly. And then I want to just show you this. So this is less, this is more. So that's all the way tight. That one's all the way loose like that. Okay? So that's a little bit different than what I see on the Zebcos. Usually loose is all the way with the gears on this side. So this is a little bit backwards. So just make note of that when you put it together. Make sure that it goes together just like that. Okay, we'll see if we can take this little piece out here. Okay, that's not going to come out, and that's okay. You could take this out, this little piece out right here. And we'll clean that off. Just note how it goes back in there. Okay, before we start take the back off, we need to make sure if we're going to service this pinion gear that we take off this retainer nut right here. It requires a little spanner wrench. You might be able to get in there, hold the handle, and use a screwdriver to get it undone. But I've never had any success doing that. And so if you have a little spanner nut wrench set, you can use that. I made a little tool here out of an old 1/4 inch socket to use on here. I've made it for my RSC3. So you need... Okay, so let's take that off. Okay. And then it has a bushing in there. We'll deal with that bushing when we take the rest of the part. So let's take the back off. This comes off a lot like the way a 202 or an 808 would. So take that handle screw off, and then the back just comes off like so. Okay? This little knob just kind of pops out of there. This little spring, this clicker spring, holds it in place. Now, one of the things that I don't necessarily like about this, but it's a cheap replacement, and that is if this wears out, in order to replace this rubber button here, you have to replace the whole back, this whole piece right here, because there's no way to really take this out and replace it. The way it's installed is down in here. There's some little metal tabs that you'd have to bend up, straighten out, and then this would pop off of there. But that's not the way they sell a replacement part. They sell this whole back piece here. Okay, now that we have this, the next thing that we want to do is we want to take off this main, the main handle gear. To do that, we just need to take out these two bearings on the handle. So you just kind of got to work them out. And you just kind of got to work them out. Now you'll notice that one side is shielded and one side is not. The shielded part goes to the outside like that. Don't put it on like this. Put it on like that. Okay, let's get to this next one. There we go. All right. Then to take this gear out right here, kind of turn it up to the side like that, sideways, and then it will come right out. It won't come straight out, but if you turn it to the side like that, it'll come right out. Okay, now we can take this out. And we can take this off. Okay, now it has a big bearing here. And we can take that bearing out. So here's the bushing in here. Now the question might be, can you replace this with a bearing? I don't think that you can. So this is a 3 bearing system with a brass bushing in it. There is no bearing that I am aware of that you can replace this with. Now, the interesting part is that RSC2 is a 4-ball bearing system, but this is not. There would have to be a bearing that would have to set down on there like that, and there isn't. So there's no way to, quote, super tune this reel. To service that bearing, you just need to reach down there and push it out. Okay, and that's it for taking this all apart. This was a used reel. I bought it used, and so it's not very dirty. It wasn't used very much. So I'm just going to wipe this off with a paper towel on the inside here. If yours has been used a lot and it's got dirt and grit and build up in there, you could actually take, and there's nothing here that's going to fall apart on you. All these things are riveted together, but you could wash it off with warm soapy water, blow it off with some canned air, or just make sure it dries off overnight. I got all my parts cleaned up. I'm ready to start putting it back together. So we're going to put it back together in reverse order. So the first line of order is to get this shaft put in, and with the bearing and the bushings, and we can even get this, we could get this part, this little nut started. Okay, so to do that, let's take and service this gear, this big bearing, by giving a little bit of oil. Okay, and remember, we're going to take and put the shielded part towards the front, with the unshielded part this direction here. Okay, so just push that in there. The next thing we need to do is we need to put on this gear here. This is the anti-reverse gear. Okay, and it has a couple little flat spots there, so what we want to do is we want to line up those flats and get that put on. And then we have this little spacer washer here that spaces it up against the bearing. Okay, just like that. And then we can put that in. And when you put this in, the anti-reverse, there's a little pin right there that needs to go in that little groove right there, like that. See that? That's how the anti-reverse is going to work. So when that's on like that, that will engage it just like that. See that? Okay. So we have that put together. So holding this right here, we can come around this side here, and we can put this bushing in here and put a couple drops of oil down on it. So I'm going to use my little screwdriver to seat it down in there, and I'm going to put a couple little drops of oil on it. That's enough. And then I'm going to get this little spanner nut started on there. Okay, I got it started on there. I'm going to finish putting it on when I get the handle put on where I can actually torque it down. Okay, I'll put a little bit of oil on it. Okay, so that's all put together and working right. Now we could go ahead and grease it right now, but it's just about as easy to grease it once you have it put back together. The next thing we want to do is oil up, put some oil on these. So put one side in first, and then you're just going to have to wiggle it and work it in there. Just like that, okay? And then you can take your bearings, put your bearing in there. Now, one of the things that's helpful is to use a handle with that spacer on there to help seat these in there, just like that. And get the other one on. And use this again to seat it down there. Make sure it gets seated all the way. Okay, looking good. All right. Now at this point, you can go ahead and grease this up. So I'm going to use a little brush. And what I want to do is I want to apply grease to here, and then spin the... It doesn't require a lot. So grease up the top of it, give it a little spin, and then grease up that bottom part. And apply a little bit of grease to this. Give it another spin. And that's all we need. We don't need a whole lot. And then give it a spin and work it on there. And it'll work right in there. Okay, that's good. Now we can go ahead and put the back on. So we need to make sure we put this back in there correctly. And I think I'm going to take and put a little bit of oil on this. Just a drop. And put it back in here. Okay. Then I got my drag adjustment gear. It doesn't need any oil or anything like that in there. This side with the gear goes in here just like this. Push and set it in there where that little clicker is in place. And that's all you need. And then just go ahead and slip that back on. And then put your handle on. Now I like to put my handle on the left, and reel with my left hand. So I put it on there. Make sure that you have that spacer on there, that brass spacer. And then put this on. Make it nice and snug. Okay, working good. And the anti-reverse works great. So let's work on the front now. Now that I have the handle on there, I'm going to finish tightening up that little spanner nut. And that was it. It didn't require very much. Now it's tightened up. It's these two things. I like to put some grease down here on these ramps. So put a little bit of grease. It doesn't require a lot. But a very thin layer on those ramps. And then put this in. And remember, it goes this way. That's the lowest adjustment right there. Okay? That's as far as the low goes. And it stops right there. Okay? And then there's this little wavy, it's a little spring gear, it's kind of wavy. So we can put a little bit of grease right here, a very thin layer. Put this on. Okay, next that goes on is a keyed drag washer. We want to put a little bit of grease on here. Then we want to put on this keyed stainless steel washer. And then we want to add a little bit of grease. And then our fiber drag washer. Then we want to add grease to the spool here. That's the spool shaft. And then we want to add, before we put that on, we've got to make sure we put this clicker back in. So let's make sure we put that clicker back in. Just like that. We can apply a little bit of grease to it and a little bit of grease to the back of this spool. So I applied some grease to the back of this spool. I'm going to put the spool on. Add some grease to the front of the spool here. The fiber drag washer, a little bit of grease, and then that. And that's it. So that's put into place. I put that little part of that E-ring right in one of those little keyways. We want to add a little bit of grease to the outside of this. This is where the cam runs. We'll put a little bit of grease inside there. We want to take and grease the inside of this a little bit. And then grease these little oil these hinges with just a drop of oil. And spin this back on. All the way until it stops. And then try it out. Okay, one of the things I like to do when I still have the cap off here, find my line and test my drag. And that's working great. Okay, there it is, the Rhino RSC3, Rhino spin cast. Wipe it off. It's a great reel. It reminds me a lot of the Omega, the Zebco Omega, the way that the gears work, just the way that it functions. Very well built reel. Like I said, you can't super tune it and add a fourth bearing, but for some reason the little RSC2 is a 4-ball bearing reel, which has an extra ball bearing up in that front nose part. But other than that, it's a great reel. I'm going to pair this up with like a 6-foot rod and use it for trout fishing, or some bass fishing, or for other lightweight fish. Maybe even try some catfish with it. It's a great reel. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel by pushing on the button right over there. And have a great day the next time you go fishing. Bye.